When Daeron the first Targaryen, the young dragon, fell in the deserts of Dawn, his body was returned to King's Landing, wrapped in the crimson banner of his house. Behind him came his uncle, Prince Viserys, who had served as regent during the boy's campaigns. It was Viserys who placed the crown upon the head of his younger nephew, a gentle, soft-spoken man of 23, known even then for his piety. His name was Baelor, and though his reign would bring peace to Westeros, it would also blur the line between holiness and madness. From his earliest years, Baelor Targaryen had been unlike his brothers. While Daeron dreamed of conquest and glory, Baelor sought quiet and prayer. He was said to have spent his childhood in the septs of the Red Keep, learning the seven-pointed star by heart and fasting for days to test his devotion. The maesters admired his intellect, though they feared his zeal. To Baelor, the seven were not distant gods, but ever-present companions. He spoke of them as if he could feel their whispers in every breath of wind. When his brother's death left him heir to the Iron Throne, Baelor wept. "I am unworthy to rule men," he is said to have told Prince Viserys. "Only the gods are fit to govern the hearts of men." But the realm had no patience for humility. The boy conqueror was gone, the lords were weary of war, and Westeros needed peace. On that foundation, Baelor's strange and saintly reign began, a reign unlike any before it, or since. Baelor's coronation was held not in the Dragon Pit or the Great Hall, but in the Sept of Remembrance, where he prostrated himself before the altar for an hour before accepting his crown. When he finally rose, he declared that he would be a servant king, ruling not for power, but for the will of the Seven. The court murmured in confusion, but the small folk adored him. To them, Baelor was a living saint, a king who prayed for their sins and blessed their children in the streets. He began his reign by emptying the royal treasury of gold, meant for tourneys and feasts, ordering it spent instead on the poor and the faith. The High Septon, astonished by the young king's devotion, declared Baelor beloved of the Seven, and the name would cling to him ever after. Yet what began as kindness soon turned to fervor. Baelor forbade the killing of animals for sport, closed the city's brothels, and banished sinful mummers and singers from the capital. Those who defied his decrees were not executed, but made to pray and fast beside him, often until they collapsed. Still, for all his strangeness, Baelor's compassion was genuine. He visited the sick and lepers, washed their feet, and gave alms from his own hand. Even his enemies found it hard to hate him. The people called him the Blessed, but in the shadows of the Red Keep, some whispered another name, the Mad Monk of the Iron Throne. In the 3rd year of his reign, Baelor undertook an act that would make his name legend. Believing that his brother's war against Dawn had been a sin against the Seven, he vowed to atone, not through armies or envoys, but with his own bare feet. Declaring that no king should send others to seek peace while he sat in comfort, Baelor announced he would walk from King's Landing to Sunspear through the deserts of Dawn to beg forgiveness in person from the Martells. The journey took nearly half a year. Baelor traveled with no shoes, no guards save a few septons, and no armor save his faith. He slept beneath trees and ate only roots and berries. His feet were torn and bleeding when he reached the mountains, yet he refused a horse. Those who saw him along the road swore that flowers bloomed in his footsteps, a miracle the maesters politely refused to record, though none dared deny it outright. When at last he reached Sunspear, the Dornish was struck by his humility. Prince Maron Martell, astonished by the king's resolve, met him at the gates and offered bread and salt. Baelor knelt before him and begged pardon for the war his brother had waged. It was said the sight moved the prince to tears. When Baelor returned to King's Landing months later, even his critics bowed their heads in awe. For the first time in living memory, peace with Dawn had come without fire or steel, only faith. Yet holiness can become a cage, and Baelor's zeal grew heavier with each passing year. Fearing that temptation might corrupt his soul, he dismissed his wife and refused to share her bed, declaring that even kings must remain pure before the Seven. He fasted for weeks, surviving only on water and honey, and spent entire nights in prayer. But his greatest act of piety would also become his most infamous. The court had long admired the beauty of Baelor's sisters, Princess Daena, Princess Rhaena, and Princess Elena, women of grace, wit, and courage. The king's love for them was genuine, but his fear of sin was greater still. Convinced that their presence might lead men into temptation, Baelor ordered them confined within the Maiden Vault, a tower in the Red Keep sealed by his command. There they lived for 10 years, forbidden to speak to any man but the king and his scepters. At first, the people called it a holy act, but as the years passed, reverence turned to pity. The Maiden Vault became a symbol of the king's excess, a golden prison born of faith twisted into fear. The songs that had once praised Baelor's purity began to mock it, calling him the Mad Septon. Yet Baelor himself seemed blind to the world's judgment. He believed he was saving his sisters' souls, even as he destroyed their lives. While Baelor prayed and fasted, the kingdom still needed to function, and so it fell to Prince Viserys, his uncle and hand, to rule in his stead. Calm, intelligent, and pragmatic, Viserys was everything his nephew was not. He managed the treasury, commanded the armies, and negotiated with the faith, all while keeping the illusion that Baelor's word was law. Under his quiet guidance, the realm remained stable, though few knew how much of that peace belonged not to the blessed king, but to the man behind the throne. Yet Baelor's suspicions of worldly matters grew. Some claimed he believed Viserys had grown too powerful, that the Seven themselves whispered warnings to him in his prayers. Whatever the truth, Baelor ordered his uncle imprisoned for the cleansing of his spirit. The hand of the king, who had preserved the realm for a decade, was locked in a cell beneath the Great Sept, left to meditate and pray. It was a strange justice, and one that nearly broke the realm's spine. Still, even in his zeal, Baelor showed flashes of wisdom. He built the Great Sept of Baelor upon Visenya's hill, a temple so vast it would become the heart of the faith for centuries to come. The king himself carried the first stone upon his shoulders, barefoot and weeping. When the Sept opened its doors, the small folk hailed him as the holiest monarch who had ever lived. But holiness, like fire, burns everything it touches. Peace with Dawn had held since Baelor's pilgrimage, but its foundations were fragile. The Dornish hostages, taken during Daeron's conquest, remained in the Red Keep, reminders of the crown's dominance. Among them was Prince Aemon Martell, a boy of 8. When Baelor visited him, he saw not an enemy, but a child. Against the council of his court, he declared that the hostages would be freed. "Mercy binds stronger than fear," he said. The lords of the Reach called it folly, others whispered that it was treason. Yet Baelor's compassion prevailed. He escorted the children of Dawn to the border himself, barefoot and fasting, and sent them home with gifts and blessings. The realm rejoiced for a moment. Then came the rumors. Some claimed the Dornish had poisoned the bread and water he had shared with them. Others insisted Baelor's fasting had gone too far and that he had starved himself in prayer. Whatever the cause, the blessed king collapsed upon his return to the capital. For 9 days he lingered, refusing food or medicine. On the 10th day, he died, thin as parchment, serene as a saint. The 7 kingdoms had lost a ruler who had never raised a sword. In his place, the Iron Throne passed to the man he had once imprisoned, Viserys II, the quiet hand who had long ruled from the shadows. Baelor Targaryen's reign remains one of the strangest in Westerosi history, an age of peace bought not by might, but by faith. To the faith of the 7, he was a living miracle, a man who bridged the realm's wounds and brought holiness to a throne forged for war. To the Maesters, he was a study in contradiction, gentle and merciful, yet blinded by zeal. Some called him the Holy Fool, others the last true believer. Yet none could deny that his light changed Westeros. Under his name, the faith grew stronger than ever before. His sept became the spiritual heart of the continent. His fasting inspired orders of monks and silent sisters who prayed for his soul. But beneath the hymns and statues, one truth endured. Faith alone cannot rule a kingdom. In the years to come, the legacy of Baelor's purity would shape politics, rebellion, and even prophecy. He was a king who sought to save his people's souls and lost his own body in the process. In the next episode, the crown passes to Viserys II Targaryen, the quiet genius who had ruled unseen through 2 reigns. Pragmatic, cunning, and wise, Viserys would rebuild the treasury, restore the laws, and lay the foundation for his son's bloody legacy, Aegon IV, the Unworthy. The saint's fire had faded. Now came the age of schemes.